Welcome to another edition of the Trucking on Route 66 in Missouri Oral History Project, a collaborative initiative between the Missouri State University Libraries and OzarsAlive.com. My name is Tom Peters. I'm the Dean of Library Services at MSU. This project is made possible in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Thursday, August 24th, 2017. We're here in the Schweitzer Brentwood branch of the Springfield-Greene County Public Library District. And our guest today is Clarence Clark, better known as Junior. Junior, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in today. So let's start with just where and when were you born?
In 1940.
1940?
And down on the state line, down Bull Shoals Lake now.
Oh, really? Okay. That was before Bull Shoals Lake, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Farm? Did you grow up on a farm, or?
Yes, kind of had a farm.
Okay.
Raised cattle and
Cattle. Okay. Then when did you come to Springfield?
I come to Springfield in the late 60s, I guess.
Okay. But you got into trucking before then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How'd you get into trucking?
Well, I was classified as 1A, and I run out of money going to school, and that was about the only thing I could get a job that paid a decent wage.
Was this late 50s?
Well, right to 60s.
Early 60s?
Yeah, it was 61st turner.
Where were you going to school?
Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy.
Oh, really? Okay, up in Rolla?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. Okay. So tell us about, your early experiences trucking. You were a truck driver.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So how did, do you remember your first day? You remember your first job?
Well, the first job actually was running was probably in Oregon, driving during the harvest time. Up there in eastern Oregon, around Pendleton and that area, and then it was a seasonal job, and I met a guy, got to be a friend, I got acquainted with a guy out of Illinois, central Illinois, and so he wanted me to drive for him, so I never had driven a long haul before, and he showed me a little on that and turned me loose, and run a while for that, and then I started hauling produce, and I hauled mostly chickens out of this area in northwest Arkansas to California and whatever. And then
so you take chickens out to California and bring produce back?
Yes, sir.
When did you start doing that?
Well, probably in '61.
When you were out in Oregon, so you were driving a straight truck, or was it what?
Well, both. I drove a straight truck and a semi, both.
Yeah, mainly produce you were hauling?
Well, hauling for a Cannon freezing company up there.
Yeah, so
peas and corn.
Peas and corn, huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And you go out to where they were picking that day and load up and then take it back to the cannery?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So when you started doing long haul trucking, who were you working for?
At that time, I worked for an individual who had a truck with prefab transit out of Farmer City, Illinois. And I mostly lived indoors and windows. I run northwest then. And I'd have pedal run. They'd send a telegram out, and you'd have maybe first drop in Omaha, Nebraska, maybe Rapid City, South Dakota, maybe Missoula, Montana, and across. You usually be unloaded in Washington or Oregon on a Friday evening.
And then what would you bring back?
When I first started making them bread ties and shopping bags, I usually haul back to Minneapolis or Kansas City or sometime Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And that'd take you another week or so to do that? Or?
Yeah, about 3 days coming back.
Yeah.
It'd take a week to go out because I'd have to pedal make those stops.
You'd have to stop, make all those stops and unload. And
about 3 days coming back.
I imagine unloading doors and windows is time consuming.
Yeah, it was no one got a lot of shipments, maybe a partial load, each place you went.
Right. So when you started to haul chickens out to the West Coast and bring produce back, who were you driving for then?
I drove for an individual had about 30 trucks out of Springdale, Arkansas then. A guy named Jay Smith.
Jay Smith?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he was just in the trucking business, huh?
Yeah, he was just strictly in trucking business. He had around 30 trucks.
Yeah. And when you're hired to be a driver for somebody like that, you just paid hourly, or you paid by the run?
Miles, usually. Oh, well, in prefab, I worked for this individual on percentage. I got 25% of his gross.
Oh.
But when I hauled chicken and produce, I drove by the mile.
Yeah.
He paid a nickel a mile.
Really? Okay. So back in the 60s, did you have sleeper cabs?
Yes, sir. I did. I didn't when I was running from Hull, Illinois. Link laws were so restrictive then that they couldn't have a sleeper on and have a decent cargo capacity on the trailer.
Yeah.
So we stayed at some old hotels and stuff, and then a lot of old truck stops had bunk houses back then.
Really?
Yeah, where you could stay at those.
Get a shower and
shower and
rest a little bit.
And a bunk.
A lot of them still have showers, but I don't think they have sleeping. Most of them.
I don't think, very few of them I don't think have sleeping facilities anymore.
Yeah. So when you're going out to the West Coast, you must have gone down 66
yes,
quite
sir.
a bit.
Mostly California. That's where about the only way we went from here.
Yeah. So in the early 60s, the interstate highways hadn't come in yet. Right?
No, sir.
Yeah. So where would you get on 66? If you left Springdale, would you go into Oklahoma and kind of wind around?
In Tulsa.
Yeah. And that's where you'd catch 66
yes,
and
sir.
take it on west?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. 2-lane all the way?
Yes, it's 2-lane about almost all the way.
Yeah.
The bypass around Tulsa, 51st Street bypass, they called it.
Yeah.
Then you get on the Turner Turnpike. Turner Turnpike was done, and Will Rogers was done at that time.
Yeah.
And you run the Turner to this edge of Oklahoma City, but you had to go all the way through town.
Right.
In Oklahoma City.
Yeah. It ended there in northwest Oklahoma City, right?
Yes, sir.
Then, yeah. By Frontier City Amusement Park, I remember. It used to be right there.
And you'd come out over around Bethany, wind around the.
Yeah.
It was a big hassle to get through Oklahoma City. It was over an hour to get through Oklahoma City.
Yeah. So you sort of dreaded that going through Oklahoma City? Yeah. So where would you stop to eat when you were going out to California?
Oh, they had a lot of stops back then.
Yeah.
This side of Oklahoma City, where you're speaking, they had about 5 or 6 truck stops right there just before you got on got into Oklahoma City.
Did you have a favorite one?
Well, I didn't really particular there. They had one. I remember had 55 gas pumps or fuel
55,
pumps.
yeah.
It was supposed to be the largest in the country, and they had a 22 white, which a semi up on for the sign, elevated up.
Oh, they'd raised it up on a pole.
Truck and a trailer sitting up on the sign.
What was the name of the business? Do you remember?
I can't remember what the name of that was. I know that there was one of the truck stops there named Browns, but I can't remember what Browns, but I don't remember what that wasn't the name of this one.
Yeah.
This was on the north side of the road as you went in.
Yeah. So would you how often did you have to fuel up when you're driving a truck back then?
Well, you didn't have to fuel up too often, probably with the, tanks for you to hold about 200 gallon.
Yeah.
Or maybe a little less. And you figure 5 miles a gallon, about,
so you about
what you was getting.
About go to 1,000 miles.
Yeah, but it didn't go that far. Usually.
After about 8.
Yeah. Usually tried to buy some in every state, like most everybody in this part of the country stopped at Tucumcari, New Mexico, the place out west of Tucumcari.
Yeah.
And when I first started,
I think I know that place.
Run across there is a shell now, or was the last I was there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there used to be when they first started running there was a El Paso natural gas. And there's 2 gentlemen that owned that place. A guy named Ed Shipley and Milton Phillips. And they had the place in Tucumcari and also one in Holbrook, Arizona.
Okay.
And most all the people around here stopped at
those 2 places?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you travel mainly at night or during the day?
Yes, sir.
or-
Yes, at night.
Mainly at night, yeah.
Well, both, night and day. Everybody.
Less traffic during the night.
Yeah, most everybody went didn't stop. You know, didn't have air conditioners in the trucks and
Really?
stuff, so they
Yeah.
just keep running.
Would you ever travel with a partner or just?
Yes, most of the time.
Most of the time you had a partner.
Yeah, going out there I did.
So one would sleep, or while the other
Or try to sleep.
drove, yeah. So you'd run all the time, huh?
Yes, sir.
Would you do like 12-hour shifts, or would you do
Most
8-hour?
time, people varied. Most time we run about 9-10 hour shifts.
Uh-huh. And then just switch off, you
Yeah.
pull over, switch off, and
You know, wherever it's handy. A lot of times, depending on where you're going to stop at. You know, it might be 8 hours, it might be 10 hours. You know,
Yeah.
or the next place where you
Yeah.
stop and trade.
So no air conditioning,
No, sir.
any radio?
Well, the radio, he couldn't pick up anything. He had a radio, but he wouldn't pick up much. And the best
Listen to
radio,
the static, huh?
best radio over then was a Buick radio. It was all one piece.
Uh-huh.
And no Buick radios was about it. Almost everybody had a radio, had a Buick radio. But during the daytime, you couldn't hardly get anything except the local station, maybe once in a while.
Yeah.
But some places
Then
you
you'd
couldn't
lose
get
it.
anything.
You'd lose it after a while too,
Yeah.
because you're driving down the road. Well, let me just state the obvious: no cell phones. You had no way to communicate. You'd have to stop and make a pay. What if you had, something broke down or had some problem? How would you get in touch with your employer?
Well, yeah, everybody helped one another out on the road. If somebody stopped and picked you up, and you went to either if you couldn't resolve a situation there, well, you rode with them to the truck stop,
Yeah.
or sent somebody else. They sent somebody else after you or whatever, you know.
Yeah. If you had a flat tire or
Yeah.
something, a
Well,
breakdown.
usually flat with duals where you could all clamp
You can make it.
into the
Yeah.
other place.
Yeah.
But other things, you happen, you
Yeah.
broke down, they usually, somebody'd help you if it's something that you could fix, but they'd help
Yeah.
you fix it right there.
Yeah.
If you couldn't, well, they'd either let you ride into place or they'd send somebody, stop by and send
Yeah.
somebody out there, call the company for you or whatever.
Yeah. So when you bought gas, did you have credit cards or did you pay cash?
Either paid cash or checks back in.
Yeah.
And some people had charge accounts. We didn't have charge accounts. We just had checks and cash.
So you had company checks or?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But they
And
were
they'd take
for,
checks back then.
Yeah, they were for a certain amount. It didn't take a lot of money. You could go to California and back with a big truck then on $250.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you filled up, you just write a check for it.
No, the check was already, they paid cash, but we had a check like they'd usually give them $100 checks.
Oh,
And
like
you
those
cash a
traveler check kind of
And
thing.
all it is regular company checks, but you'd cash your check and
Oh, I see.
then you had cash for maybe the next place.
Oh,
you
I see. They were
stopped.
pre-made out
Yes,
for certain amounts, and then you
Yeah,
just.
it's made out to you, and you just cashed wherever
Yeah.
where-
Now, did you have places that where the food was better than? Others?
Yes, there's always places better than others,
Yeah, and you knew where they were.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you remember any of them? Or
Sir.
do you remember any of them?
Well, most everybody here stopped at like I say, at Tucumcari, New Mexico,
Tucumcari,
and Holbrook, Arizona, and Kingman, Arizona. Everybody usually stopped there that you knew in this part of the country.
Yeah.
And there's a place in Amarillo where a lot of people stopped.
Yeah.
And went through town. I think T-Bones was the name of the place.
T-Bones.
Yeah, you drove through the middle, went through the middle of all these towns. You didn't
Yeah.
have it.
Yeah. There were very few bypasses
Yeah,
and so.
there's a place in Albuquerque where most people stop west of town at the top of the hill there
Yeah.
at Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And
Did they have that cutoff, or did you have to go up to Santa Fe? Do you remember when you were driving on 66?
we never did go up that way.
Oh, okay. You just went straight across Klein's Corners.
Yeah, I went through Klein's Corners.
Klein's Corners. Okay.
It was Klein's Corners were the higher elevation where other places was, you always had a downhill run, going whichever direction you was going, and once you got to Klein's Corner, it's downhill both ways.
It was downhill both ways.
And those old trucks didn't have enough power, you made a lot of difference.
So, yeah, I mean, still trucks struggle. I mean, you get up to above 7,000 feet a couple times when you're traveling on a 66. And so you'd struggle sometimes going up those hills.
Oh, you get in the wind, those old trucks didn't have very much power. You get in the wind, about a 45 mile an hour, about you might go across West Texas or New Mexico at 45 mile an hour on a more or less level.
Even on the level, huh? And 2-lane too. So,
Oh, it's all 2-lane.
yeah. So what was it like traveling with, just cars, other vehicles? I mean, did they respect you and you respect them? Or?
Well, yes, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Most of the people was going to California or coming back this way, they usually.
Vacationing?
Yeah, or going,
Yeah.
back and forth. Usually, across 66, most of the people after you passed Oklahoma were usually going a long ways.
Yeah. They were going the whole way.
Yeah.
What was it like crossing the desert?
It's pretty hot, but it wasn't really bad because you couldn't sleep, but everybody had an ice water jug and what have you, and I thought about, it's hot in here, you go across Mojave Desert and it'd be 115 degrees or so, 120, and I think this was rough, And then I think, this I got it made, I got an ice water jug right over there, and I'm running along here, and if I break down, there'll be somebody pick me up, and I'm right in town.
Yeah.
Them people that come across there in these wagons back here before that didn't have a road. Road would be washed out in the desert, and if they broke down, and there wasn't nobody to come pick them up, so I thought I was fortunate.
Yeah. Would you drive all year round?
Yes, sir.
Take the run? Yeah. So, any bad winter weather you ever run into?
Oh yeah, you'd run into some bad weather.
Yeah.
Flagstaff was that's the highest altitude to cross there. They had a lot of snow in Flagstaff.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate. It seemed like most of the time I run through there, I never had real bad weather. It'd either be right behind me or it kind of cleared up when I got there.
Yeah. Now, when you're running chickens out to California, I'm assuming it was one drop. You'd go somewhere. Right?
Most of the time.
Yeah. Were they boxed or what?
Well, both had frozen and fresh chickens.
Okay.
You'd have what they call ice packs. It'd be in water-bound wooden type boxes full of ice. Refreshed and put ice on top of them and the milk. The water keep them cool and wet,
Right.
Fresh chickens, and then you'd haul frozen also.
Yeah. What were the reefer units like back then? Were they temperamental?
Well, the ones we had usually pretty good shape, and most of the time they had they wasn't as well as they are now, they were pretty decent.
Yeah.
They just when I first started, they started getting pretty dependable reefers.
Yeah.
Before that, I guess the guys had a lot of trouble with them.
Could you monitor them from inside the cab, or would you have to get out and check them every once in a while?
Well, some of them had little lights where on the corner you could see whether
it's green or red.
Yeah.
And so when you got out to California, where would you typically drop your load? Out some LA someplace?
Well, I went everywhere. I went a lot of times around the Los Angeles area and a lot of times up around the Bay Area also, but people went everywhere,
Yeah. So I imagine that was quite a drive going through the LA basin with a load of chickens.
Well, you'd coming into California, come in at Needles.
Yeah.
And you run Needles, and you got to town of Needles, you got 18-mile grade, just west side of Needles. Across by that's 66 all 2-lane road. And you go across Essex and Amboy and across that way. And I heard Amboy, you went across the railroad tracks, made a square corner, and across, and then you got into Ludlow, and then you're on to Barstow. And Barstow, it was all 2-lane. That was all 66 2-lane all the way up. Just before you got into Barstow, you had a agriculture thing. For the check. Now the place, the last time I was out there, was right close to the state line, between Needles and the state line. But then it was a little town named Daggett. right outside of Barstow.
Was that a big kind of choke point where you'd have to take a while to get through there because you had to get inspected?
No, it wasn't. It was usually pretty efficient. They see what you had on, and turned you loose if you'd had like orange or citrus, stuff like that they were wanting to quarantine, that stuff. They didn't want diseases coming in.
Right.
From Arizona and California both had that.
Yeah. And then, so you'd unload your chicken, probably either LA or up in the Bay Area somewhere.
Or in between somewhere.
Yeah, and then you go. What would you do after you dropped off your load? Would you rest for a little bit a day, or would you?
No, we'd usually try to get a load back as soon as we could. Depending on the seasons. Around Salinas, a lot of stuff come out of Salinas.
Yeah.
And during the season, strawberries come out around Watsonville and that area a lot.
Yeah.
And some around Oxnard.
Yeah.
And the lettuce that followed the seasons, that's where they set the lettuce up. You start maybe up around Salinas in that area, and you go down go clear down to El Centro, maybe in Yuma, and sometimes in Phoenix, around Glendale and Phoenix.
Yep.
And then you go back, as they harvest that, they start back over again,
So how would you determine what you're going to haul back? Do you have some company dispatcher? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, so you call him and say, what am I getting?
Yeah, most of the stuff that particular outfit I hauled for was hauled into Kansas City and usually peddled it across Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
And but there's a brokerage company out there, and they'd call my boss, and my boss would tell me where to pick up, and I'd call the broker, and they'd tell you where to pick up 100 boxes of oranges here and 50 boxes of grapefruit over here, and whatever like that.
Yeah.
Where to pick it up at, and then you take it and deliver it. And we'd usually start out on a lot of pedal runs, like maybe Wichita and Salina and Kansas City, finish it up in Kansas City.
So what do you mean by a pedal run, where you just little drops?
Yeah, part leave a shipment, each place, maybe 100 boxes here, 200 over here at another place, whatever, something like that.
Yeah. What was a dream trip for you? So no snow, no extreme heat. Carrying chickens out. I mean, you always carried chickens out, right?
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
And that was all pretty nice, because usually, like I said, the fellowship of people was pretty good back then. You always run on people you knew before you stopped usually. Yeah. And then everybody would help you. You're never alone.
Yeah.
And like we had some communications, hand signals, stuff like that. You'd meet people of it.
Yeah. No CB radios.
No. No CB radios.
Yeah, but you would just have, truckers had hand signals?
Yeah. Well,
kind of their own language?
If scales were well, like that, and if a cop was coming, his two fingers, down the road, and this sort of thing, flash your lights.
Turn off your lights, turn them back on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody understood that language, what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
Coming on ahead.
Yeah.
Accidents. Did you encounter any? Did you have any accidents?
I never had any myself.
Really?
I've seen several.
Yeah.
Over the ways. But
yeah.
It seemed to not have as many accidents because it wasn't near the traffic they have now. No, just a fraction of the traffic got now.
So really, accidents weren't that prevalent?
No, not really that bad.
Across, did you ever get pulled over, just spot check or something by highway patrol?
Yeah. Well, at that time, checking your logbooks, had all Kansas, New Mexico, and Arizona was the only place to check your logbook.
Yeah.
Except the Interstate Commerce Commission, which is like a Department of Transportation now, but then they called it the Interstate Commerce Commission.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'd check you to scale or whatever and check your equipment.
Yeah. Did you have to get out and shift a load before you weighed it, or?
Yeah, I have. I've done that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about the logbooks. So what did you have to log? Were there checkpoints, or how long you'd been driving? Or?
Well, you had a logbook with four lines on it. You had off duty, driving, and on duty, not driving, and sleeper berths.
Yeah.
Had the 4 different deals. You drew a little like a little graph there, and then put at the bottom you note at time and where you located at. Maybe Oklahoma City. You stopped and ate with hour off duty at Oklahoma City, and then you either go sleeper or driving, or down the bottom line was on duty, not driving, like you were unloading or whatever. But hardly anybody used much of that.
Really? But you had to pretty much account for your all 24 hours of the day.
Yes.
What you were doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that kind of a pain to do that? Or?
It wasn't too bad back then.
Yeah. Then who would check it? Your dispatcher when you got back, or?
Yeah. You turned your logs in in case the Interstate Commerce Commission checked them, but they had them on file.
Yeah.
But
so was a 30 truck outfit considered a pretty small outfit back then?
About mediocre.
Yeah. There were some independent truck drivers who were
lots.
Yeah, they owned their own rigs. And,
yes, sir.
Yeah. There were a lot of them, huh?
Quite a few.
Now, were they kind of different in some ways? Either they were like in a big hurry or...
No, not really. They're about the same kind of people.
Trucker's a trucker?
Yeah.
What about the big outfits? I remember when I was a kid, PIE, Pacific Intermountain Express. What were some of the other big truck lines back then?
Well, running across 66, you had a lot of Western Gillette and Transcon and Leeway out of Oklahoma City. You've seen a lot of those running across there, across 66.
Now, if you got out of Tulsa, you probably didn't see many Campbell 66 Express, because I think that was kind of the extent.
Not too many down there, but up here, of course. And they run a lot out of here, and a lot between here and St. Louis. You can see a lot of Campbell 66.
Yeah. Between
here and Memphis.
Yeah. But you never did the 66 run up to St. Louis that much, or?
Some, not a lot.
Yeah.
Once in a while, I'd haul St. Louis. They like to say the cargo restrictions and the weight in the state of Missouri, the gross weight was 64,650 at that time, 64,650 pounds.
Yeah.
And usually,
was that light compared to some other states?
Well, now it's 80,000. Everybody can gross 80,000. Most of the western states was 72 to 74,000 gross, and Missouri was light. Oklahoma, I don't know what they were. They wasn't real picky.
Right.
In Oklahoma, they give you a little slack. Missouri wouldn't cut you any slack.
Really?
They give you a fine for 500 pounds,
Really?
or less.
So if Missouri was one of the light states, and it's having to run through Missouri was bother, or you'd have to.
Well, the company I worked for tried not to run through Missouri. Most usually end up unloading Kansas City.
Yeah.
And
would you even go up the Kansas side if you were going to Kansas City?
Yeah.
Really?
We come to. Usually, if we're going to Kansas City, we cut off 66 at Tucumcari on Highway 54 and run through the Panhandle of Texas and up Liberal, Kansas, and into Wichita that way.
Yep. Okay. So, when you were on 66, was it just another road?
Well, it was that was a main road, everybody, going to California from this part of the country, that's where they went. That's where they went.
Yeah, it was just the way to get to California.
Yeah. I mean, they might have all their belongings moving to California and strapped on top of their old car or something, And it was a different deal across New Mexico and Arizona and the desert. Their favorite colors of stations seemed like was red and yellow and white. And one of the chain deals out across New Mexico and Arizona was Whiting Brothers stations. They had a lot of those.
Whiting Brothers
stations. Yeah. And they all wanted to get people money, naturally. And they'd have skull and crossbones, don't enter the desert without a full tank of gas, and make sure to get your water bag here,
Yeah.
And,
explain to us about water bags. How did those work?
Well, they worked on they was canvas, and they had a rope top handle on them. Yeah. And you hang them on the
fill them with water. You'd fill them with water.
Yeah, and wet the outside of them, and it seeped, and the evaporation would cool them.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it worked out in the where it had low humidity.
Really?
Yeah.
It'd cool you down a little bit?
It cooled down quite a bit, more than what the regular, it wasn't ice water, but it wasn't hot, real hot.
Yeah. So then you drink that water?
Yeah, that's what they drank. It had a little metal lid on it, and he flipped the lid and
Really?
poured the bag up.
So you're hanging the bag out on the
Mirror of the
on the
car.
mirror and wet it,
Yeah.
and that evaporation would cool
Yeah.
down the inside.
We didn't have any truck. We had plenty of room. We always had water jug,
Uh-huh.
with
Yeah.
ice in it for a while, as long as it lasted. But
Yeah.
people in the cars, for a lot of them had to.
Oh, so people in cars would use those water
Yeah,
bags.
more than what trucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Where would you get ice? Did you have to get extra top ice sometimes?
Yeah, and they had about all the major truck stops had an ice blower, and what it was, ice come in 300-pound blocks,
Right.
and they'd put it out, and they had a blower on it. And they'd blow,
They'd chop
like
it up
top
and
ice, they'd blow
shoot
it.
it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they could aim it and
Almost like
Yeah.
blown insulation in an attic.
the same way.
They just shoot it out
Yeah.
there, and
most all the truck stops had that.
yeah.
And one company, down some of my friends, down in Monette, he tried a CO2 instead of refrigeration in it.
Uh-huh.
They started to try to get a little popularity there with CO2, where they just a tank, and it had a thermostat. Of course, they cool the stuff with the CO2 instead of a refrigeration in it.
Yeah.
And
That's kind of new technology back then.
yeah, and some of the truck stops had where they could refill the CO2 tanks.
Yeah. So tell me about the food. What would you eat along the way? What was kind of a typical, if you stopped, what would you eat for?
Well, just like you would kind of at home anymore.
Yeah.
The fast food places didn't hardly exist back then.
So you get a blue plate special or something?
Yeah, they're all pretty good places to eat.
Yeah.
Reasonable.
I mean, what kind of stuff, meatloaf and mashed potatoes?
Yeah, you get stuff like that, roast beef or
Really?
pork or pork chops
Yeah.
and one of the things that I thought about that you don't see anymore, and they used a lot for special, was halibut. Halibut steak used to be a pretty common thing.
Yeah, you can get halibut steak.
And peas and carrots was really good. You could ask them what the vegetables was it peas and carrots or carrots and peas? I liked them, but they was
You have two choices, peas and carrots or carrots and peas.
They had a lot of those.
But not stuff like hamburgers or French fries. They have fryers back
Yeah,
then?
you could get that. And in truck stops, they had little hamburger places along, that you could stop at, but wasn't any big chain outfits like they are now,
Yeah.
like McDonald's and that sort of thing.
Coffee was the beverage of choice, or?
Yeah, usually most people drink coffee that I know associated with.
Yeah, okay. So did you get to know most of the drivers along the road?
Well, you got pretty well acquainted
you
with
could
them.
know them, and
If you didn't know, you might not know their name, but you knew them,
Yeah.
Knew the guys.
you know by sight, because
I mean,
only so many places to stop, refuel, eat, sleep.
yeah, there's quite a few places, like I say, to stop and you just seen people and like I say, everybody help everybody and tell everybody what, if something, watch out for the holding the road down and so, sometimes you get a hold the road someplace where you, the wintertime especially, where it's freezing thawed, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Overall, was the road in pretty good shape?
well, fair, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And the way they operated back then, Arizona, with a truck, you could run pretty well fast. The old truck would run. The police let you, all that trouble. But they wanted you to keep right on the shoulder of the road. They had pretty wide roads, but they wanted you to stay extreme shoulder.
Uh-huh.
And they always room, most of the roads, 66 in Arizona, you could run 3 abreast down through there.
Really? Did they?
No, they didn't do that. But in case, a car
got caught, you're passing somebody.
Passing you, and a truck was coming, the trucks would be on the extreme right.
Yeah, you'd get over far enough, and
they could pass you.
Yeah.
And cut down a lot of accidents, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And the biggest trouble with the automobiles back then was fatigue. People driving from here out there nonstop and stuff like that. That was #1 killer in Arizona for automobiles, people in automobiles.
Just they fall asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as a truck driving team, was fatigue an issue?
Well, pretty. Like I said, in the summertime, you went through all these towns,
Yeah,
and no air conditioning, or you didn't get very good sleep.
yeah,
And they didn't. Nowadays they got hour ride cabs, hour ride seats, and hour ride suspension on the truck. Didn't have any of that back then.
so it's pretty bouncy, huh?
Yeah, sometimes you
Yeah.
get some pretty rough stretches of road you couldn't sleep in.
Yeah. Did you ever did you ever get like, when the monsoons come through the southwest there, did you ever get a washout or snowing so bad you couldn't make it? You had to stop.
Some, but most of the washouts was down on the southern route, like you went through Yuma
Yeah.
and went through Calipatra and Indio, and had a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
On that desert when it rained real hard, it'd come
Yeah.
down.
Just wash.
But it didn't have that much in '66.
Yeah, okay. So 66 was pretty reliable.
Yeah, except for around Flagstaff, sometimes it get really bad.
Snow.
Then I'd do turn around and run the south route. People would,
Oh, yeah.
if it's closed up at
At Flagstaff,
Flagstaff,
you go down,
through
come across the southern.
Tucson and whatever, Yuma and that way.
Right, right. Did you have a favorite town? I mean, I've driven it from Springfield, the corridor, I-40 mainly, out to Holbrook. And every stretch is different. That's one
Yeah.
thing I like about 66. Did you have a favorite stretch, a favorite town when you're going back and forth?
Well, I like to run across New Mexico very well. Across there, usually. Well, like with those old trucks that underpowered so much, Flagstaff, you come east, you're going downhill all the way to Holbrook.
Yeah.
It's 100 miles from Flagstaff to Holbrook, and it's about, might say, all downhill. So you can roll a lot better down there.
Yeah. Did you encounter, when you were traveling, any Native Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans?
A lot of people in Gallup. Gallup was a bad place. You had to really be careful there and weekends.
Careful of what?
Running over people.
Really?
I mean, they would drink pretty heavily.
Yeah.
When they started getting pickups,
Get pretty tipsy?
they might be. Well, they usually it didn't make a difference how cold it was or whatever. And I wonder the pecking order. I found that if you buy the whiskey, you rode in the front of the truck. If you wasn't, you rode in the back. And they ought to be down the middle of the road with lights all off and a dip.
Really?
Sitting in the middle of the road with that truck all drunk with no lights, and you come over the hill and
Standing still or
yeah, park down.
parked out in the middle of the road?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Huh.
A lot of times they do that.
Yeah.
And then in the winter,
So watching out for drunks was
yeah, you watched out. You had to watch out for them.
Did you sort of start to learn some, did you, when you saw an oncoming truck or an oncoming vehicle at night, could you sort of get some sense that maybe that person's a little bit...
Well, yeah, it's always a possibility that he might be sleepy or something.
Of course, in a truck, there's not much you can do. You can't swerve or...
But no the Navajos, I think the Hopis mainly, and they have a powwow over there, and you just barely creep through Gallup.
Really?
And
Just a lot of people on the street? And...
Yeah, on the street, and Santa Fe run through there, and sometimes they'd have to shut down the track to keep people off the track. There's so many people.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, alcoholism was a bad thing for the Native Americans out in that part of the country.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have a favorite town that you just kind of look forward to, or?
Well, not really. We just used them about all out there,
Yeah. Was it exciting to get to California? Don't you go up over the San Gabriel Mountains and then you're coming down into
you come in and across Colorado River there, go to Needles, and then you go over hill to go to Barstow, and then you head south. I think it used to be 66. It was 66.
Yeah, you get
466.
You get pretty high. You go through a pretty good mountain range there before you.
Well, it's not real high, but you go over Cajon Pass before you drop down into San Bernardino.
Yeah.
But if you're going the other way, there Barstow was the fork of the road. If you go to Northern California, you took 466 and brought you out of Bakersfield.
Yeah.
You went over to Tehachapi, and it was pretty high at Tehachapi. And going to Bakersfield, Bay Area, Sacramento, any of those places you went. Now it's California 58, but it used to be 466.
When you're loading produce, how's it load? I mean, now it's pallets, right? It's all palletized and.
No, it was all on the floor back then.
Really? Case by case, they loaded in there.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of people to load and unload.
Yeah. Well, like for instance, strawberries, they did have flat at the time, and about every third row they'd put laths between them, try to keep them shifting.
Yep.
But they had a lot of problems. You know, you had to really be careful about bumpy roads and all that stuff. It'd shift a little bit and match it.
Yep. Did you have the tie bars back then?
Load lock top deal.
Those load lock things.
Yeah, you had them, but they wasn't real efficient.
Oh yeah.
Well, your trailer would flex, you know.
Yeah. Load lock would fall down. Was the equipment overall? I mean, was it pretty good equipment? You felt confident in your equipment?
Oh yeah. We had. It was pretty dependable stuff. But everybody back then was. It was a different deal on what it is now driving.
Really? How so?
Well, getting into driving, everybody you had to be pretty dependable, or they wouldn't. You think about it, and now they got the people under the thumbs. You know, they got all that stuff. They know exactly where every truck is.
They know where you are. Yeah.
And they can adjust the unit from here to California. You know, the refrigeration unit, they monitor that.
Really?
They can monitor the speed.
They can monitor from some central location. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they can readjust, recalibrate the unit, refrigeration unit from a fixed location, you know. Then,
you felt you had more independence back then?
Boy, it all.
And responsibility.
Yeah, you had, I mean, your driver, like I say, the people that drove had to be pretty reliable.
Yeah.
Because you take a man, he gives you money, take off with his equipment. And those Cummins engines back then, most people had Cummins engines. Some had Detroits and some had Max, but mostly Cummins. And if you had the engine set up calibrated pretty hot, turn a lot of fuel to it, you could tear that engine up in 100 miles easy.
Yeah.
And if you drove it right, it's hard for some of the people to believe, but if you drove a Cummins engine right back them days, you could run to California and back twice and still have clear oil. Your motor oil would be clear.
Really?
But if you lugged it or overwound it or didn't drive it where you burned every bit of the fuel.
So when you're driving, you're constantly sort of monitoring the engine noise.
Oh yeah.
But you didn't have a lot of instrumentation, I'm guessing.
Well, you had quite a bit. You had gauges for the temperatures of rear ends and transmissions. And of course, typical gauges. Everybody had a stack mirror then, what they call a stack mirror. You had a mirror out here and you look to see what the exhaust was putting out.
Right.
And most of those engines, Cummins engines, especially out at a higher altitude, would put fire out about foot high, you know.
Right.
When it wasn't far all the way from the engine up there, what it was hot, unburned fuel, and when it hit the oxygen, it ignited.
Yeah. So, let's say you had a flat. I mean, was that just, if you're driving 65, 70 miles an hour and you get a flat, depends on where the flat is, but you'd know it immediately? You would?
Pretty well figure when you had a flat.
Yeah, you can
If you didn't, back then you had tube top tires, and you catch your truck afire with running flat.
Yeah.
And you also, if you had a flat, you took it real easy to get it into place, or you run the tire with a tube would cause the tire to separate inside and whatever. You tried not to save the tire, you know.
Yeah. So running with did you when you drove as a team, how did you get teamed up?
Well, usually
would the employer tell you?
The employer usually.
Would it just be load by load, run by run?
No, usually
Joe
usually stayed together for a period of time till one guy got tired of the other, or whatever. He had a family, something he had to do with his family, and they sent somebody else with you, fire up some other person.
So who were some of the guys that you ran with quite a bit?
Well, I went with several different people. I went with one guy. he and I run together, and his brother and I run together afterwards with a guy named Seaman, and the guys, the different guys. I run about everybody I run with is I'm pretty fortunate. They're all good people, you know.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah. So would you talk or would you not talk so much when you?
Oh yeah, we visited a lot.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times you couldn't sleep, you know.
Right.
Sit up and visit one another.
Right. Were you pretty exhausted by the time you get done with the run?
Well, not too much, because most of the people, well, they had older people there too, but I was one of the young people.
Yeah.
Then, you know.
Yeah, you were a young whippersnapper.
Yeah.
So how long did you do it?
Well, running out there, I guess probably from 60 to 75, with a 2-year out for the Army.
Yeah. Served in the Army for
Yeah.
a couple of years, yeah. You go overseas or?
No, I was lucky when
Yeah.
Vietnam was going on, but I didn't.
You didn't.
I didn't.
You didn't get deployed.
No.
Yeah. So about 13 years total. You were running back and forth. And
Yeah, I run there run out that way till 75.
75. How did the road change between 60 and 75?
Oh, a lot. That's when the big change was. They started
Yeah.
making 4-lane.
Yeah.
In 75, when I was running out there, it's still 2-lane from I think it's around Ashport down to Kingman there. That stretch down. They don't. 66 goes up through Peach Springs and around that way. That's the way we still run at that time.
Yeah.
But they built a new road since then.
Yeah. But they were building the interstate while you were making the run.
Most of the interstates were done there in the 60s, you know.
So I remember when they were building the interstate, you'd get on, you'd get off, you know.
Yeah.
Would you do that with a truck? You know?
Oh, yeah.
If the interstate were available, it was so much better that you'd get on the interstate.
Yeah, we were on the interstate when we could.
Yeah.
That day.
I was going to ask you, there's a little town, now it's a ghost town, right on the Texas Panhandle, New Mexico border called Glen Rio.
Yeah.
You remember going through Glen Rio?
Yeah.
66 went right down the main street. And,
Yeah.
Was it a stop? Would you?
No.
No.
It wasn't a stop.
You just go down Glen Rio.
Yeah.
Keep going.
In San Juan, they had a port of entry for the truck scale there, and port of entry in San Juan, New Mexico. That's first down in New Mexico.
Yeah.
You got to.
But Tucumcari, west side of Tucumcari was a typical stop.
Yeah, that was everybody stopped there.
And Holbrook too.
Yeah. A guy named, like I say, Shipley and Phillips.
Yeah.
Ed Shipley run the one in Tucumcari, and Milton Phillips run the one in Holbrook, and later on
they were partners.
Yeah, they built one in Kingman, out west of Kingman, but that was probably in about 68 or something like that. They built one out in Kingman.
Yeah, that was just the place to stop, huh?
Yeah, that's good. They're pretty accommodating people.
Yeah.
And then you knew the man that owned the truck stop, you know.
Yeah. What about like the waitresses? Would you have? Did you know the waitresses?
Yeah, usually a lot of the people you knew, because they was there all the time. They knew everybody in there, and they say, "Oh, Bill was asking me about you or something the other day, you know, or whatever. Come through here." So
but they kind of convey news about what's going on.
Yeah.
Because they listen to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What about breakfast? If you're on the road and you're going to have breakfast, what would you eat?
No, just about normal, like bacon, eggs, ham and eggs, you know, stuff like that sort of thing.
Well, what did you eat much? When you got out in the southwest, would you eat Mexican food? Was that available?
Yeah, a lot of people ate Mexican. I did myself. You know, a lot of people like Tucumcari had a good Mexican cook. And
you didn't like it too much?
Yeah, I liked it.
You liked it? Yeah. Would you sort of back here in the Ozarks? Were there many Mexican ethnic restaurants that?
No, not too many.
Yeah,
back there here.
Did you kind of look forward to getting out west, where you can get a little bit different kind of food and get some hot food and?
Yeah, you get
spicy,
a little spicier stuff out that way.
Did you look forward to that?
Well, some of them are pretty good. You know, like they used to have a sign advertising can't think of it, back west of Tucumcari there at where 54 cuts off there.
Santa Rosa?
Santa Rosa.
Santa Rosa?
Yeah. There used to be a guy, they used to have a sign there, steak and beans, you know, this guy. Showed this guy's big fat jaws, you know, on the signs. And they was all, one down the road, like I say, a lot of times people that, even though you went pretty slow up the hill, a lot of people want to run along with trucks or, you know, wasn't familiar with that in case they had a breakdown or see where they're going or stuff like that. They'd fiddle along with trucks on the hills to go out across there.
Did they ever draft behind you?
Not too much.
Would that bother you if somebody was drafting behind you?
Well, I'd worry about them, you know, might pull out the wrong time, you know, and meet somebody if they run real close. But they didn't know it wasn't much. Never had much trouble with that.
So overall, it was an enjoyable experience. Huh?
Yeah, it was really, believe it or not, with all the hardships and whatever you had, it was a lot more fun than what it is nowadays. I wouldn't, with the new equipment and the equipment and the roads is so much better.
Yeah.
But the rest of it's not. It's all
not as much fun. Huh? Yeah.
Now the people and it's changed and
So what happened after '75? You stopped.
Oh, I started driving for a freight company here.
Oh, who'd you drive for?
The Consolidated Freightways. Yeah.
So you're just doing local runs?
No, I run mostly. Most of the run out of here was Dallas.
Oh, you go from here to down to Dallas.
And most of that was our major run.
What kind of stuff would you haul down there?
Just general freight.
Anything? Yeah.
Yeah.
Less than load, typically.
Yeah, it was all. You hardly ever seen what was in the trailer.
Oh, really? You didn't even know what was in there?
No.
Yeah.
Well, you had your bill of lading, you could check it, but unless you had a problem or, you know, something leaking out the back or whatever, you usually didn't mess with it.
Yeah. Cold stuff? Frozen stuff?
No, they never hauled it. Only two outfits around here that hauled any refrigerated stuff, that was Camel 66 and Jones. Jones and Camel 66 both hauled.
Jones was based out of
Springdale.
Springdale, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You never worked for either of those companies, huh?
No, I never worked for either one of them.
Yeah. Okay. So you were hauling freight down, just general freight down to Dallas, back and forth quite a bit. Was that a day? Was it a day?
Well, usually when you first started, it was always night. But it wasn't bad either. But it mostly after you left Big Cabin, Oklahoma, it was mostly 2-lane, except down around the lake. They pay 4-lane that, but the rest of it all 2 lanes. You got to Texas, you know.
Yeah. Driving through Dallas Fort Worth must have been.
It was bad then. Of course, it's just a fraction of the size it is now. You know, Dallas is just in that length of time. You know.
Yeah.
We'd go through Sherman and Dennis in the summertime. It's pretty rough. We didn't have air conditioners then either. Yeah. And I think it's 26, 28 stoplights in Sherman and Denison. You go through there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the sun is down. It's pretty warm.
So, would you ever, how would you cool down if you just got too hot? You or your rig got too hot?
Well,
pull over.
It just didn't happen unless you was low on water or something, you know, like that with a truck. But person didn't get too hot as long as you're going down the road, you know. You didn't have water like everybody had water jugs.
Yeah. Keep all the windows down and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like I said about people with automobiles. I didn't know where they was going. Well, and always in places out there had the hands out, you know, wanting their money. We found out later on in this outfit we used to fuel at in Kingman that all they place have radiator flush and do this and do that, you know, and advertise.
Yeah.
And from Colorado River to Kingman at 60 miles and all uphill. And the car's going to run hot going up through there, naturally, and most of the people loaded. Well, they'd think something wrong with it, you know, and they'd come along, they'd sell them a water pump, sell them, boil out the radiator,
didn't really need
and what they just get their money.
Yeah. What about any criminal activity? You know, people running something they shouldn't be running, or?
I didn't see much of that.
Yeah.
In fact, you never locked your truck.
Really?
No, you never locked your truck back then. Around the truck stop, like I say, people, they didn't.
Would you have like a cash pouch or something? Would you carry your cash with you, or?
Well, some people had, we called them, wallets had a chain drive.
Yeah,
They would call them chain drive wallets, you know. But
I know what you're talking about.
most of them didn't have that much money anyway.
Really?
But nobody bothered you. Till you got like Los Angeles, someplace like that, you had to worry about that. But in between there, well, everybody looked up for one another.
Yeah.
And the drivers, you never worried about a driver back then. I mean, drivers were, you never.
A driver would never.
A driver,
would never steal from another driver.
You could be in Los Angeles at Steve Richfield, for instance. Another one, big truck stop there. A lot of people on Alameda Street. Everybody, that was a truck stop street in Los Angeles, and.
Alameda.
Yeah. And you could be down there and everybody would, like say we didn't have cell phones back then, so it'd call us back in an hour, see if we got something for you. You could be waiting there, working on your truck, maybe tightening some bolts and checking your truck out. And you'd have your toolbox out there, maybe working on a truck, and here's a guy sitting next to you. You'd never seen him before in your life.
Right.
But you say, you're going to be here a little while? Yeah, I need to go make a phone call. Would you kind of keep an eye on my stuff here?
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Nowadays, he might be that guy might want to take your tools, the guy that drives the truck.
No worries. But back then, there were no worries. Just
no, he's another truck driver. That camaraderie was different,
Yeah. So back when you were coming into LA on 66, I want to say between Pasadena and LA, downtown LA, there was a restaurant that had a big chicken on top of the roof. You remember a restaurant with a big chicken on top of it?
I can't exactly place it. Pasadena Freeway, so you wasn't allowed on Pasadena Freeway with a truck back then. They had when it started running out there, they had San Bernardino Freeway, the Hollywood Freeway, Pasadena Freeway, and the Long Beach Freeway. And I think that was on the freeways that there at that time.
But they didn't allow trucks on freeways, huh?
You run San Bernardino Freeway, and you could run Hollywood Freeway, but you couldn't run Pasadena. I think Pasadena was the first freeway they had, I believe.
Yeah.
You run and they wanted you to run the right lane all the time on a truck.
Right. Did you have to ever worry about low overpasses?
Oh, yeah. Not so much going out that way, but...
Yeah.
But they had a place right there in Los Angeles coming out of Alameda on the San Bernardino Freeway, coming east, that you couldn't run the right-hand lane right at that particular point because they had the right shoulder was low.
Was too low.
Oh yeah, other places, like right up here in Nevada, Missouri, going the 71 highway.
Yeah.
You had to go run underpass there. I think it was like 12 foot.
You never hit one, did you? Or?
No.
Yeah. You knew.
I'm almost.
Really? Have to let some air out of the tires or something again.
Back up. Go another way.
So after you're hauling stuff back and forth, when you take something down to Dallas, what would you bring back? Just whatever.
The company would take care of all that.
Just another load.
On that after 75.
But you pull something both ways.
Yeah, usually sometimes like on a Monday or something, well, they wouldn't have any freight to come back and send people back empty. Yeah. But that was
But it didn't bother you if they came back empty, huh?
No, they paid the same amount of money.
Yeah, per mile.
Yeah,
it was always per mile.
That was a union job. Consolidated Freightways was.
Yeah.
Like Camel 66 and Jones and Yellow Freight and Roadway, all was union companies.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of good benefits. That's the reason why I quit the other.
Yeah, so you drove both as I don't know what you call it, independent, not really independent truck.
And I owned my own truck too.
Oh, you owned your own truck for
one time.
Yeah. When was that?
From 66 to 75.
So was that after you got out of the service?
Yeah. After.
You got your own truck, huh?
Yeah, I bought one.
So how does that work? You would just contract for a load? Or?
Well, I was with Tri-State out of Joplin at that time. And instead of using ammunition, I hauled ammunition. We hauled mainly,
So you went from using ammunition to hauling ammunition?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, we hauled a lot of bombs and stuff like that, you know. With Tri-State, it was probably had 2,000 trucks at one time.
Yeah. And where'd you take it down in the southeast? Or?
Oh, well, the main shipping point on the East Coast was Sunny Point, North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And the West Coast is either Bangor, Washington, which is west of Seattle, or Port Chicago, California.
Uh-huh.
And that's where most of it went.
Yeah.
And you picked it up. They had a place all over the United States, you know, that made ammunition.
Right, right. So you'd run it again. So were you running on 66 again when you were running ammunition?
Yes, some.
I don't know what Port Chicago is.
Uh,
I don't know where Port Chicago
Yeah.
is. But was on 66?
no, it's Port Chicago's on right on around Concord and right in their Bay Area, you know,
Right in the Bay Area.
upriver.
Yeah.
But no, we run some 66. Then they had for deregulation on regulated commodities, which like produce and poultry wasn't. But most everything else was regulated, like beef was,
Right.
processed beef was a regulated commodity even.
Yeah.
But all kind of other goods was regulated, and you had to run certain roads, you know.
Yeah.
And we run 66 some, but see, with that, why, that truck route like down Amarillo, it was with explosives or hazardous materials. You had to go way up north of
Yeah, you
town
couldn't,
to go
you couldn't
around.
go through town.
And
No.
then when they got the interstate through there, you go on through town.
Yeah,
In the late
but,
60s.
Yeah, and you didn't want to get caught going somewhere with ammunition you weren't supposed to go because you were something dangerous. You'd get
Yeah.
really,
And California
Fight
was
later.
really rough.
really.
Hauling any kind of explosive, they had a certain roads you could run,
Yeah.
certain places you could stop. You couldn't stop in the middle of a Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
You had to
Yeah,
be
keep
at certain
moving.
certain
moving.
places
Yeah.
that you was allowed to stop.
So when you're owner operator, I guess that's what you were called.
Yeah.
Right? Owner operator. You just owned the tractor.
Well, I did at that time, but
Yeah.
later on I owned a trailer too.
Really? You had
And
your own
then,
trailer?
later on that I had my own authority or I run under my own name,
Uh-huh.
you know, and had my own authority to run. But
Uh-huh.
in '75 I was running under my own authority then.
Oh, so you weren't working for anybody.
No,
you were
not
totally.
75.
Yeah. And how was that?
It was all right. You had to hustle a little bit and get your own,
Yeah.
you know, but being around, you pretty well knew what you was doing, you know, like
Yeah.
certain times of the year, like California soft fruit season, we used to call it that, when you
Yeah.
made some good, about the best money you would on all produce was from
Soft
1st of June
Soft food.
until the end, about the 1st of July. Why?
Right.
All that
They'd pay
stuff.
top dollar because they
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to get
Yeah.
it out to the market.
And there was a strategy on that too. You wanted to be on the east end in the first of the week and California on the last of the week.
Oh,
They would load you out there on the weekend in
Really?
California,
Really?
but you wasn't on the east. And
Oh.
also most of the trucks was out there on the first of the week. The rates might be $700-800 more on a Friday than what it would be on Monday.
really?
So if
It varied by day of the week.
yeah, well, so because of supply and demand.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted produce back here. I mean, on the first of the week
Yeah.
type deal. And if I was unloaded there and during the soft fruit season, and like on a Monday, I wouldn't even look for a load. Wouldn't take a load till Thursday or Friday anyway.
Really. Really, you just kind of.
And of course, it gets so much more money.
Yeah.
And then get back in the rhythm.
It was
again.
worth your while just to
Yeah.
wait
Oh, yeah.
for a better time.
And you know, like I say, certain times of the year, had a little deal where I hauled a box meat out of St. Louis to Miami and picked sweet corn up off the Lake Okeechobee and take back to Snooks Market and I do that in May, you know.
Yeah, that kind
And
of deal.
run it there in May.
Did you ever haul, beef on hooks? You know, where it's
Oh, yeah.
what they
Yeah.
call it, swinging
meat, yes.
swinging meat.
Yeah.
Was that a challenge or
Well, you had to be pretty careful. you
take
couldn't
a
make
sharp
it
curve?
yeah.
That meat swinging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, usually if it was loaded tight, it was a lot better.
Yeah.
But it's still, you had to be
Those
real
were
careful.
halves of beef, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
How much those things weigh?
well, we used to haul about 40,000 pounds.
Yeah.
An old boy here, there's a company here used to be Blue Transport in Springfield.
Blue Transport.
Bilou.
Oh, Bellew.
Yeah.
B-I-L-E-A-U.
Yeah, he was out of Ozarks, I think, originally. He started out with tankers hauling milk a little bit, and then he went on to general freight. And an old boy here in town, he and I we had a little run out from out between Dodge City and Garden City, Kansas. We pick up meat there and take to Homestead Air Force Base down south of Miami. We had a run down through there, for a whole swinging meat down every week down there.
Yeah.
Done that for about a month, not very long.
Yeah.
But,
So, did you ever, of all the trucking that you've done in your career, did you have any run that you particularly was memorable, or that was, you think, well, that was the best one ever, or, you know, or were they just they all kind of become blur after a while?
I can't pick out anyone really better than any of the rest of them, really.
Yeah. It was just what you did,
He was always trying to get where you was going with that load, and soon as you trying to get it unloaded, as soon as you got it unloaded, you had to hurry to get you another load to go back. You know?
So that's when you were really kind of, once you unloaded, did you have to, when you were unloading, did you have to do anything? Or?
I have. Most of the time you'd hire somebody to do it, but
Yeah, were you expected help, or?
sometimes some of these places was. Yeah,
And then as soon as you got unloaded, you wanted to get another load right away.
Yeah.
Because time was money.
yeah.
Yeah.
And whether you was working for yourself or working for
Yeah.
somebody else, you know.
Yeah.
But,
Did you ever have to come back from the West Coast empty?
no,
Never did.
I never did.
Probably would have been just economic.
Sometimes I'd lay 3 or 4 days out there. I never did lay that long. I know guys that had to lay 3 or 4 days.
So what do you do when you're just laying there waiting for a load? I mean, would you read? Would you sleep? Would you?
Yeah, some of all above, and maybe drank some. Some of the guys that drank some, you know, and
kind of give you a chance to relax and unwind a little bit.
Oh, hotels usually, well, like in Los Angeles, most everybody stayed at Lancashire Hotel.
Which one? Lancashire?
Lancashire.
Yeah.
And they come down and pick you up, you know, it's around on Alameda, all through Alameda there, and all up there, and then most of the
So they specialized in serving the truckers.
Yes, they was big in the truck
Yeah.
and railroaders and stuff
And they
like
actually
that.
pick you up and take you to the hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did it a lot. They still do that around
Really?
for these companies, you know.
Yeah.
Some of the motels cater to
Yeah.
drivers and
But now some of them
pilots
have
and
sleeper
railroad
cabs
people.
that are pretty nice, aren't they?
Yeah.
They have TVs in them. And,
Oh yeah, they got and most of them now, they instead of running their truck engines, well, they got an auxiliary engine there for
Really?
air conditioning.
Really?
And the trucks, so much big sleepers. Then, you know, 32-inch, 36-inch sleeper back years ago was about normal size, you know, they're pretty small.
Now they're bigger than this room.
Yeah, some of them big guys would have to lay on their side there.
What about the health aspects of trucking? I mean, it's a tough job, and you're sitting a lot. And do you ever worry about the health aspects of it?
Well, I was young then, you know, when I done most of it. I got plenty of exercise, but it was for long hours and hard to sleep. You got deprived of sleep a lot.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it wasn't too bad, really.
Yeah. So you said you'd do it again. If you could do it all over again, you'd do it again?
Well, maybe. At the time, it was knowing what I know now and under the circumstances, I probably would.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of things would be better. I do different now what I know, but
Yeah.
But at that
When
time,
did you stop?
In 2002.
2002. Was that a big decision?
No, the company went broke.
Which company was it?
Consolidated Freightways.
Consolidated?
That's the last company I worked for. I worked for them 27 years.
Really?
from
And you
75.
were a union
Yeah.
union driver.
From 75 to 2002.
Yeah. So being a union driver, what do you had to pay dues, and did you meet monthly or something, or?
Well, I didn't not really that much meeting. Most of the road drivers was all they usually had the meetings all like on a weekend, Sundays, afternoons or something. And most all the road drivers was on the road on Sundays
Yeah,
afternoons.
so you couldn't even attend.
No, not very much.
Yeah. Any strikes?
Yeah, I've been in a few strikes.
Yeah.
There's always peaceful strikes around
Always
here.
peaceful.
But no, it was the only way to go. That's the reason why I went from my work for myself, working for them. It's hard to compete.
Yeah.
You know, couldn't compete, and they had back before deregulation, they had authority where they could get good revenue, and they could afford to pay good revenue.
Yeah.
So
it's better paying to be.
Oh, it's better paying than it is now.
Yeah.
It's a lot better to drive before deregulation than it is now.
Yeah. So it's been 15 years since you stopped driving.
Yeah.
You ever miss it?
No.
Oh.
I wouldn't want to go back now.
Yeah.
Driving, it's like I say, it's all a ball game, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't start in today. I wouldn't start in on it.
Yeah. You never drove truck, just local stuff, you know, just delivering around Springfield or?
No.
Never did any of that. Yeah. All right.
I drove old dump trucks back when I was a kid, you know, and stuff like that.
But
no.
once you got driving
Yeah.
long haul, you just stuck
No.
with it. And,
Yeah.
well, thanks very much for taking time to share your
Well.
memories, experiences with us.
Kind of reminiscing. Is like I say, there's not too many people I used to run with still around where I got contact with, but
Yeah.
there's a few of them.
Yeah, so it's been, 57 years since 1960, so it's been a few.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things changed. Like I say, that there wasn't no interstates to California. You know, it was one of the last ones to go make interstate highway 40 out there between Barstow and Needlesville. It was 2-lane way up there
Not a lot, not a lot.
till probably 72 or 3.
Just before you stopped hauling stuff.
Yeah, before they went 4
Was
lanes.
construction ever, when you run into construction when you're driving a truck, was it bothersome?
Oh yeah. You might have to sit there and wait for a
Yeah.
good while for them to clear the road. You know.
Did they
how
have
it
a
was.
flagman out there?
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
I got stuck a couple times or two going across under construction, where it'd be soft and
Oh, really?
the road.
You actually got stuck, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have to pull you out with a grader or something
Yeah.
to get you across the road.
Okay. Well, again, thanks again, Junior Clark.